to edition 78 of All Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because we have a mutual interest in serial killers, and as long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison. Episode 78. I have to admit, I'm finding this difficult, because I've got noise-cancelling headphones on, a hat, and a blanket around me. Not because I've gone mad, but because, to try and improve the sound quality. And I just sound like I'm underwater to myself. It's quite distressing. so I think I'm actually shouting, but it's like a bad dream. I'm shouting and I can't hear myself. But, thanks for listening. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, thank you very much for listening. This episode is a listener suggestion.
Yes, thank you.
I love, Rachel, that you've painted the picture of you sat there like the little match girl.
These noise-cancelling earphones, they're brilliant for listening to music to. Talking on them. Oof. Absolute nightmare.
It's because you can't hear yourself, right? So you don't know how loud you're being.
Yeah, so I'm probably just screaming. Listener suggestion, because we asked on the old Facebook page what people wanted to hear, and we chose this one, Mary Ann Cotton. Because we've not done a woman for a while.
Yeah, we haven't, and she's someone that we toyed with doing a live show on, and we decided against it because she's a poisoner. Speaking of live show, there are still tickets left for the 30th of May, the show that we're doing. The audience tickets are sold out now at the Kentish Town Forum.
An audience ticket sold out now? I didn't know that.
Well, I think there's like 3 left. It's like awkward shapes of bubbles or whatever. So to all intents and purposes, it's sold out. But there's still tickets for the live stream, which will stay up for 48 hours afterwards.
Exciting. So you can get tickets from ticketmaster.co.uk.
Yes. Or the Live Nation website. If you search for All Killa No Filla, we're also on there. And I'm very excited about the subject that we've chosen to talk about.
Oh, I cannot wait. Maybe I should drop a hint. I go through the area where the subject of what we're going to talk about used to live about 3 times a week. So I'm very excited. I might take us some photographs for the live show. Do a little album and archive for you.
That sounds appalling. Please don't do that.
Yeah. I might do that. That'd be a bit of fun. I'm very excited about it. I think the people in the room and on the audience rather will be excited too.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to find a way where we can meet people, but I just don't think it's possible. But that is something that we were saying the other day, that as soon as live shows come back, we just want to meet everyone after the shows.
Yes.
Yeah,
that'd be to say thank you for
for supporting us.
Yeah, it'd be nice that. I look forward to that, like we did at the Lowry that time. That took ages, didn't it? Have we ever told the story about the
We must have done.
I don't know if we have. Have we?
I'm sure we've told this. If we haven't told the story about when we went to the Chinese restaurant after the Lowry and I'm sure we told this. Do remind us at a live show, but I'm 99% that we told you about the bucket of lube and what happened to it.
And it's nothing to do with me, may I stress.
Also, if you're listening for the first time and you're like, what do you mean bucket of lube? I thought this is a serial killer podcast. It's not going to get much better for you. You should tap out now, mate.
Yeah, if it's not for you now, it's not going to be for you in 45 minutes.
So, let's get cracking. We're going to talk about Mary Ann Cotton.
I should say as well, Mary Ann Cotton, there is an ITV drama about Mary Ann Cotton. I watched it over Christmas with my boyfriend Tim's dad. It was very graphic, sexually.
Oh, really?
I was a bit I mean, I didn't particularly like it, to be honest, the show. I thought it was a bit boring. But you know what I hate, right? I'm sorry, we will get into it in a second. And I think ITV do this a lot. When it's a period drama, but then they're out in the street and there's like a fucking bin in the background, it's like, come on, continuity.
Oh, right. Okay, like TripAdvisor stickers on the window, that stuff.
Yeah, that kind of stuff. There's often a lot of stuff like that. There'll be in a 1-bedroomed house in Victorian London and there's a fucking plasma screen TV on the wall. They just don't pay enough attention. But the sex scenes in it were really graphic. So I remember sitting there with Tim's dad being like, oh, God, this is like watching this old sex. Like Victorian, literally knocking boots. And it just seemed to go on for ages and ages. Anyway, Mary Ann Cotton.
Can I just say about sex scenes and period dramas? They're always just sex as well, aren't they? They're never anything else. Whereas I think something about like Victorian England, I think there would have been way more fingering than you actually ever see on the screen, because everyone's mouths are an absolute state. Everyone's genitals are an absolute no-go Chernobyl area. I just think it would have been hand job central back then. And you never see like Sherlock being tugged off in an alleyway, and I think that would have been the truth of the matter.
Oh God, don't. Honestly, I just hate the idea of sex in the old days. Just makes me feel ill. Everyone stank. Everyone had bad hygiene. The bed bugs, lice. It's amazing we didn't die out.
I bet everyone's genitals was an absolute disaster.
Ugh. Do you know, before we get, I don't know why I'm going to tell you this, but you know William Blake, the poet and the artist?
Mm-hmm.
I think it was William Blake, he was so religious that when he married his wife, I'm sure it was William Blake, if it's not, correct me, he saw she had pubic hair and he was disgusted.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Because he was, drawing cherubs and, they'd draw women without, sort of very divinely, without any hair and stuff like that. And when he found out she had pubes, he was like, what? I didn't sign up for this.
Well, it's no different to some men's attitudes now.
Absolutely. I've got this theory. If you're an adult man who used to have his crusts cut off bread, you've got a problem with pubes. And I don't know where I've decided that from, but I just think it's a thing. Anyway, Mary Ann Cotton.
I also think if you are funny, if you're a heterosexual man and you're like, oh my God, about pubes, then I don't trust you to be able to use your dick properly either.
Yeah,
if you're such a baby that pubes scare you, then I trust that you won't have done the legwork and the research into knowing how to make it good in bed for the other person as well. Yeah, I just think you should have your fucking licence revoked.
I think as well, I think men that shave the pubes off, I think that's weird. I don't want to see no pubes, you know what I mean? Or, I find this very strange as well, when you watch a lot of football now, you see a lot of the players are waxing the legs.
What?
Yeah, a lot of football players wax the legs, and you're like, come on, lads.
What, is it to make themselves faster? Like, is it an aerodynamic thing?
Is it bollocks? They're just all prats, aren't they? Just big babies. Pampered little babies.
Wow. You've got off to a flying start, mate, with your intolerance.
Anyway, Mary Ann Cotton was born in October the 31st, same birthday as Jimmy Savile, Halloween, 1832. She was born Mary Ann Robson, and she was born in the northeast of England, which at the time was a very industrial area. It was a big shipping community. It had, I think they had shipyards and things. Yeah, it was a dock, shipyards. It was, proper industrial Victorian hive of activity.
Her parents were quite young. They were under 20 when they were married. This is strange because you hear about her dad being very religious and overbearing and quite violent. And that's, weirdly, when I think about that, I think of a guy in his sort of 50s or 40s or 50s. But this was a guy who was like 20-something and just being this sort of religious zealot who was very hard on the kids. Mary Ann apparently was known for being very pretty as she was a girl. And in fact, it sort of not got her into trouble, but she was noted for her looks, which is then sort of... She's, I think the phrase sexual scandals plagued her life is a phrase that is used about her.
It was a very, very poor upbringing that she had. Her father was a Methodist, very religious. I always feel about Methodists, because they were such a popular religion back in the day, and still are to an extent. I always feel about Methodists, it's like, God, life was miserable, and here come the Methodists to make it even fucking more miserable. Put that booze down. Don't do this. Just, like, life was so short that, you're probably dead in your 30s, maybe. And you're dedicating your life to something that doesn't exist. Don't at me. It just...
Yeah, I mean, in Wales, there was a Methodist revival during sort of the 18th century. So it's quite dominant. And yeah, temperance was massive in Wales. In fact, until the 90s, there were still places that were dry counties where you couldn't get a drink on a Sunday, like in living memory. So it's really, I think it's quite prevalent in Wales. And I just think everything seems cold and shit and hard back there. And the fact they were like, the things that you do enjoy, like music and booze, they're wrong. Like, Also, only fuck every now and again, and absolutely hate it when you do it. Just like sucking you're like, what is the point of being alive? Like, no wonder fucking people are so attached to cheese if you mention you're a vegan. Because there was a time in the UK when the only fucking joy was a lump of cheese every 6 weeks.
And a piece of fresh bread. Oh, a lovely piece of cheese. Anyway, they moved to a place called Morton when Mary Ann was 8 years old. Her father was a miner. He was in a terrible mining accident as well. So he was a violent man at home. He wasn't particularly, caring towards the family. And he was in an accident where he fell down a mine shaft.
Yeah, he was doing a job. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's like called an opener or something like that. But it doesn't mean he went first on a comedy night.
That's exactly what I just thought then.
It means that you were responsible for opening up a new mine shaft. So he worked for the Merton Colliery. And so he was digging down into this shaft and he fell in. And as he fell in, it collapsed onto him.
Ugh.
Which is obviously really traumatic because that family was barely making any money anyway. And then to have the principal breadwinner killed was like, it's a very real possibility they're going to go to the workhouse. And God, this is so awful, how her father came home to them. The body was delivered to the house in a coal sack with a logo of the colliery on the side.
Fucking hell. It sounds like something a hipster would do now.
Well, yeah, it's like, it's the perfect cross. It's so awful and so traumatic, but it's the perfect cross section of, when people are like, I like my men how I like my coffee. And it's like, what, in a sack? Is that what you mean? It's fucking horrible.
All crushed up in a Hessian sack. Awful. What a horrible thing to deliver to people.
Yeah.
The family then, obviously, they're struggling because he's died and he made all the money, and they didn't want to end up in the workhouse. So Mary Ann's. This is the thing. I went to school with so many girls called Anne Marie, like the John Pauls and the Anne Maries. That I keep saying Anne Marie. Mary Ann. They didn't want to end up in the workhouse, which you can understand because the workhouse was brutal. And so anyone that doesn't know what the workhouse is, if you were too ill or poor to work, or you had no income, you went to the workhouse, and that's where you would be fed, watered, pathetically, may I stress, and you'd complete tasks for that privilege. Charlie Chaplin was in a workhouse when he was a child, which is quite interesting. Yeah. Had a very poor upbringing, Charlie Chaplin. Doesn't excuse the paedophilia, but
was he a paedo?
He was interested in very young girls. Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
Didn't say anything himself about it, but he didn't really speak much anyway.
The house they lived in at that time as well was tied to the colliery, so it was provided or subsidised by the colliery. So as soon as, not only did industrial negligence lead to their father's death, it then led to their eviction, which is so like, when people are like, oh, health and safety, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, do you remember what it was like before you had to compel big businesses to take care of people? They would just let people die and then kick you out your fucking house. Like, you can't trust big businesses. There's a wealth of evidence that says that they will not look after you out of the goodness of their own heart. You have to legally compel them to.
Yes, exactly. Instead of going to the workhouse, Mary Ann's mother remarried, and the stepfather, he didn't like Mary Ann at all, and she didn't like him. So when she was 16, she left home as soon as she could, and she went to work in service at the house of a chap called Ed Potter. So basically she's working cooking, cleaning, housemaid type duties.
Around this time as well, where she moves away from her stepfather, George Stolt, she was only 16, but she was already, like, apparently in a sexual scandal with a local churchman. So part of her moving away, was to also get away from these rumours. So she lives there, but after 3 years she moves back home to live with her mother and train as a dressmaker.
She marries a man called William Mowbray when she was 20, and they have 5 children, but 4 of those children die of gastric fever, which is going to happen a lot. To lose 4 children, even then, back in the day, was a lot. So they were considered very unlucky.
They moved all the way down to Devon as well, which is just very far from everywhere, and especially from the northeast. So, but weirdly, her crimes kind of go undetected for a long while because it was steam and things like that, and trains like that was newly invented, which meant that people could move far quicker than they ever had before. You know, before it was what you could walk or feasibly go on horseback, and now you could jump on a train or a boat and be somewhere completely different when no one knows you, no one knows how many children you have or had, or you know that they all died mysteriously, and just be somewhere else and sort of set up shop. So that the period it takes part in leads to her going undetected for a very long time. But they do move back to the northeast.
Yes. So William then gets a job on a steamer in Sunderland. So they move back to Sunderland. I imagine there's a lot of transient jobs during this time. Is this the Industrial Revolution time? I suppose it is, really. Yeah. So in January 1865, William injures his foot. Now, he has to come home from the steamer, and Mary Ann's looking after him. And suddenly, even though he's got an injured foot, he suddenly dies of a gastric disorder. Now, the doctor is called, and he goes to console her. And he finds Mary Ann dancing around the room in a new dress that she'd got from the life insurance that she'd taken out on William.
Yeah, it's pretty dark. But they had not that I'm justifying it, they had a horrible relationship anyway. They argued all the time about money. She was terrified and obsessed with not being poor and not going to the workhouse. But they argued so much that he deliberately got a job on a steamer because he would be away from her more. And it wasn't until 1865, where he injured this foot and he moved back, that they spent some time together. And that's when she's like, okay, someone's going to get a tummy ache. And it was like how they died, the method of dispatching people was awful. They would get severe sickness, severe diarrhea, and they would die in absolute agony. That was just normal. So they think there's a level of psychopathy with her, because with a few of them she sort of watched over as it happened. She got, when William died, she got 35 quid, which in today's money is about half a year's salary. So a decent chunk of money. But she moves with her kids then to Seaham Harbour, and she starts a relationship with Joseph Nattrass, who is engaged to another woman, and she tried to break them up, but it wouldn't happen. So he eventually gets married to this woman, and she leaves after his wedding, but he keeps coming back into her life. They're sort of on-off lovers for a good few years.
Now, again, one of her children becomes ill. 3.5-year-old Margaret Jane dies of typhus, allegedly. And this is when she moves back to Sunderland. Bloody sit down for a bit, will you, Mary Ann? Fucking hell.
She's had 9 children by this point, and only one of them is still alive, and that's Isabella, who goes to live with her grandparents. And she's there for about 2 years old. So when Mary's in Sunderland, she starts working at this has got an amazing name. They don't name buildings like this anymore. The Sunderland Infirmary, House of Recovery for the Cure of Contagious Fever, Dispensary and Human Society. That is a full title of where she used to work.
That says to me people couldn't decide on a name, so it became all of the names.
Yeah, that is, what is it? A camel is a horse designed by committee. It's that, isn't it? And be like, well, you've got to put the Humane Societies in there, otherwise we're not going to give you some money. Yeah, definitely. While she's there, she basically, a big part of her responsibility is keeping the wards clean. She's very well liked. The patients like her. She's very friendly. She's very thorough. And she would clean the wards with a mixture of soap and arsenic, which not a lot of people knew about its properties or how to recognise arsenic poisoning at that time.
While she's there, she meets a chap called George Ward, who was recovering from an illness, but he was a very strong, healthy man and was expected to make a full recovery. And, he's just in there for a little while. He was working on the ships and stuff, so he was a big bloke. And he takes a fancy to her, and they get together. And then in October 1866, George starts to get paralysis in his limbs, and he starts to have stomach issues. And lo and behold, he dies. He dies of English cholera, which I can imagine, it's the best cholera in the world, English cholera. Typhoid fever, And she also has taken out life insurance on him. He was buried the day after his death. There was no post-mortem, and she collected the money. I always think as well in those days, I wonder how common post-mortems were because people were sickly.
I don't think they were, because apparently a lot of her... another thing that contributed towards her lack of detection was in the lower classes, people died all the time of these diseases in quite horrible ways. So it was just sort of like, well, that's what happens to poor people. They're malnourished, they don't keep themselves clean. You know, life is hard. They're not meant to live for very long. So it wasn't as standout as it appears to be.
I'd be quite interested to see how she, if she paid for a good burial for them or, you know, gave them a headstone.
No way.
I'd be interested to find out. I was thinking that.
Absolutely.
Although we were talking before, I might have mentioned this before. Can't stand the idea of a burial. Freaks me out, man. I think it's like, you've been, see you later, family member or friend that I loved. I'm just going to leave you here to rot under the ground. And I can't cope with. Sometimes I think, luckily none of my close relatives have ever been buried. I think I won't be able to cope with it. But I just kind of think they've died, but then you go and visit a grave and they're just underneath as a skeleton. Like, I'd hate to think that my gran was a skeleton. With a little bit of hair just stuck to her head and...
There's nothing for it to be stuck to, mate, because it doesn't attach to your skull, does it? So
no, but you see little corpses. Well, all right, when you see a corpse in a horror film, it's
you're watching horror films.
Yeah, in a horror film, it's always got a little bit of soft hair on its head, like the Tales from the Crypt man. He's got a little bit of hair, hasn't he?
Yes, but it's not a documentary. So
what?
I'm the complete opposite. We've spoken about this before. I hate the idea of cremation because it was like you never existed, whereas bones is something tangible that even in thousands of years to come will remain and prove that you were here and you existed. And I hate the thought of like when my parents, when the sad day comes when they pass away, that they get cremated and that's it. They were never here.
Yeah, get me in that bloody oven, I tell you. I don't. Honestly, I don't like the idea of a funeral. I don't like the idea of a service. I don't like the idea of a final resting place. Just get rid of me, incinerate me. Don't even collect my ashes. Like, just let me go. Like, I just can't deal with it, mate. I think it's very... So, for example, I went to a graveyard. I was in Lincolnshire recently, went to a graveyard, and Tim was just popping some flowers on his grandparents' grave, which I think's a lovely thing, isn't it? What a nice boy. And he was just saying about the people buried in the graveyard, a lovely little country graveyard. And, there was, 8 people buried next to each other who all at one point had all been boozing buddies in the pub. I just think it freaks me out. Like, they were all once alive, stood at a bar having a laugh, and now they're all dead next to each other.
Lovely.
It's weird. It freaks me out.
I genuinely find it weirder to see a group of old people next to each other than the idea of skeletons under the ground.
But no, there's the skeletons around now in graveyards that nobody living has any memory of at all. They're just skeletons.
And if it wasn't for that skeleton and that gravestone, they'd be completely erased. Because unless you are basically like Hitler or Marilyn Monroe, people will forget you when you're gone.
Are they the two? Well, that's it.
Well, there's many more people that that outlive living memory. It's people like that, isn't it? Or like fucking Hamilton. Now people give a shit about him because there's a musical, but largely people can live really remarkable, exceptional, brilliant lives, or very awful, terrible lives, and be completely forgotten about. But there'll always be a gravestone, and there'll always be a skeleton. So there'll always be a monument to the fact that they were here.
Ugh, can't stand. I mean, I suppose it shows at one point that you were loved, but oh god, I mean, just think Elvis is a skeleton now. He's a skeleton. Princess Diana's a skeleton.
Is she buried? Oh yeah, she's buried on that island, isn't she?
Yeah, in a lead-lined coffin. Prince Philip's a skeleton. You know what we should do? Imagine if you could dig all these celebrities up. I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with me.
What, are you alright? Do you need to open a window?
No. If you dug up all the skeletons and then got them together and took them on tour.
I think you should do it more like Naked Attraction, where it builds up and you got to guess who's who.
Yeah. Oh, with those hips, it's got to be Elvis.
Yeah, I was going to say, I bet Elvis, you could tell from his sort of like legs. I feel like he's got big thigh bones.
I mean, the skeleton that pops into my mind, I mean, as an intrusive thought, that I'm sure we've mentioned this before, we certainly mentioned it at a live show, the fact that Jimmy Savile is buried at 45 degrees in, is it Scarborough?
Yeah.
And he's got no headstone anymore, obviously. And he's buried in a tracksuit with a cigar and a Help for Heroes bracelet. That is happening as we speak. That is decomposing. Yeah.
Well, I think to be honest, I think he's done with his decomposing. I don't think he's still at it. How long does it take?
Longer than you'd think. I mean, you can still dig up the skeletons still knocking about from like the 1600s, isn't there? Depends what you're buried in, I guess.
How long to go from dead to a skeleton?
Oh, I reckon about a year.
Right, I'm going to Google this. Or should we ask that? I bet there's someone listening to this who knows.
Yeah, I reckon. I mean, if you're buried in like, an eco wicker, those cardboard coffins, I reckon probably about 8 weeks, maybe. But I reckon in a wooden coffin, possibly a year, maybe.
Okay, did you know that there's a verb for it?
Really?
Which is skeletonization.
Ooh, lovely.
And according to Wikipedia, depending on where you are in the world, obviously, and where it is, where the body is left or buried, affects things. So obviously somewhere that's humid with lots of insects is going to break down quicker than somewhere that's sub-zero. Natural embalming happens in peat bogs, but largely it's somewhere between. This is absolutely mad. That's so funny. I was scrolling down and it said indications, and then the headline was sex, and I was like, oh my god, how do you know if someone's had sex with them? But it's obviously it means sex as in biological sex. Okay, so it's between 3 weeks to several years for a body to completely decompose into a skeleton.
Yeah, just as I suspected.
Oh
Also,
my god,
what about that
apparently, well, I mean, I'm just pulling this out the internet, so someone who knows more, do get in contact. In a coffin, it's about 8 to 12 years.
Yeah, I thought it'd take a long time.
Fuck. And if a dead body is inside a coffin and buried deep underground, it could even take 50 years to decompose all tissues on the body. What the fucking fuck? Well, that's all right. Okay, burn them all.
Yeah, you see what I mean? I don't want to think of my loved ones fucking slimy as fuck in the ground. No, thank you. No, they were good people, my grandparents. I'm glad they were cremated. Also, what about that festival, which I think is in South America? It's like a little South American village where once a year they get all the dead people out the graves and like have a bit of a do with them. Have you seen it?
Yes, I have. Yeah, is it on Day of the Dead?
No, I think it's a totally different thing. It's like a different festival completely. But you know what it always looks like? If you Google image Ronnie Wood gondola, it's the first picture of Ronnie Wood with his newish wife, his 30-odd-year-old missus, taken a few years ago. And it just looks like that festival, like she's dug him up. And he's like, come on, I'll take you. I'm sorry you're dead, but I'll take you on a gondola.
That's so funny.
It's incredible. Edit, we've really digressed there, haven't we?
We have, but it's sort of, it's on theme-ish, isn't it? But that's really sent me under that fucking hell.
I feel a bit queasy now. Yeah, so anyone who wants to get in touch with us to give us some information on decomposing, that'd be great.
We'd love that, yeah.
I'd be interested in it. Anyway, back to Mary Ann. As we know now, she's taken out life insurance on her children, on her husband. Once she's got the money from the death of George, she takes a brief holiday. And why not?
Can I just say with George, that when George passed away, the doctor who was attending was blamed for treating him incorrectly by the people around George, and she sort of encouraged the accusations because obviously it would take any suspicion off her. She's like, yeah, he was a shit doctor actually. And then the doctor gave evidence, because there was an investigation into George's death, that George had been very ill, but he was really surprised at his death because it was so sudden and with sort of nothing to do with anything he'd had before.
She's a right one, isn't she? She takes this brief little holiday, doesn't say where to, and she returns to Sunderland. And she needs a job by this point, so she's like, okay, what am I going to do? She decides to become a housekeeper again, and she becomes a housekeeper to a chap called James Robinson, Which James Robinson is a name which I think everyone's known a James Robinson at some point in their life. Or will meet one.
Yeah. One in Wales is, I think everyone knows at least 8 Chris Robertses.
I used to work with a chap called James Robinson, who was a lovely fella. Very strange sense of humour, though. He was not much older than me, but incredibly old-fashioned, to the extent of bizarre, right? And I used to get on quite well with him, but he was weird. He was on jury service once. And I said, how was jury service? And he went, another innocent man sent to prison. I was like, oh, right, won't bother asking. So I was like, I don't want to know what this is. And then he showed my friend Brill Phil, we used to work together at the library, and he came in one day, James, and he said, I've some great news. Well, it's twins. And we were like, he had this girlfriend, and we were like, oh, congratulations, James. And we're like, oh, this is so great. When and then he showed us a picture on his phone. It was 2 kittens. They'd got 2 kittens over the weekend. Yeah, I know. But he thought it'd be really funny to tell us that his girlfriend was expecting twins. This is after he'd had a conversation with us about how they couldn't have children.
Fucking hell. That is absolutely bizarre.
Yeah, so he told us his story, just saying, me and my wife or girlfriend, we can't have children, but we're all right with it, blah, blah, blah. And then when he said, it's twins, we were like, oh my God. And this went on for 5 minutes, us going, congratulations, James. And then he just showed us this picture of 2 kittens, and we were like, okay. Such bizarre behaviour, isn't it? So weird. Anyway. I've blocked that out of my mind for years. So weird. Anyway, so he was a shipbuilder, James Robinson, living in the Pavilion area of Sunderland. His wife Hannah had died recently, so he was a recent widower. He had 4 children, so he thought, I need a housemaid and a housekeeper to help me keep on top of things, because heaven forbid a man should do stuff. Now, within a month, the 10-month-old child that he had, James Jr., suddenly, within a month of Mary Ann's arrival, he gets gastric fever. And unfortunately, the little boy dies. Very tragic. Yeah. And James Robinson Sr., he turns to Mary Ann for comfort. And a month later, she's pregnant. So they get engaged. She wastes no fucking time, does she? So, she must... What has she got? What is it that she had that was so potent?
Maybe she had nice teeth or something that you're not... But there must be something, because she absolutely rattles through fellas like it's no one's business. Or maybe just everyone was like that at the time.
Yeah, you never know, do you? Different
we
times.
Can't put our moral judgment on what was going on. It was so bleak around there, as long as it's consenting, put it in wherever gives you solace. I think just go for it. Get your balls deep where you can.
Oh, get your Victorian balls deep.
Get your horrible, horrible Victorian balls in. So Mary's pregnant. She's obviously a live-in housekeeper. She started in November 1866. She goes back to live with her mum in County Durham because her mum gets very ill. Now her mum starts to recover and then gets these stomach pains and she dies. She's only 54 years old, and it was only 9 days after Mary arrives. So she takes Isabella back, who's been living with her mother until this point. So this is her only surviving child other than the one that she's carrying at the moment. And she moves her and Isabella back to James Robinson's.
We should say before this, her stepfather, immediately after the mother dies, took up with one of the neighbours who was a widow. And then Isabella decides... She takes Isabella back to Sunderland. Is it Sunderland? She takes it back... Yeah, so she takes her home to James Robinson's house. So she's 9 years old, Isabella. And then in April 1867, something happens to Isabella. So this is just a month after the kid comes back with its mother. Oh, she starts to get severe stomach pains. And Isabella's life is insured. So Mary Ann collects £5 life insurance, which is today's equivalent of £5,000.
And then just about the same time, 2 of James's children get stomach pains and they die, and all 3 children end up being buried in the same sort of last 2 weeks of April in 1867. So 3 children she murders in quick succession in the same household. Now, shortly afterwards, a couple of months later in August 11th, 1867, she marries James, and then baby Mary Isabella is born in November of that year.
Also, recycling the kids' names again. She's fucking weird.
There were 6 names back there, and you got some combination of all of them. So baby Mary Isabella was born November. She becomes ill with stomach pains, and she passes away in March 1868. So she was not very old at all.
They have another baby, George, who is born in June 1869. James Robinson, not the one with the kittens, the one with all the kids and no wife. James discovers that Mary has run up debts of £60, which was... £600, which was £7,100, I think.
No, 60 quid, which was about seven grand.
Oof! Crikey, Bob. Now, what she was doing as well, she was sending... he found out that she had been sending the children to go and pawn various valuable items in the home.
Yeah. And she had stolen... She was meant to go and bank 50 quid, and she didn't. She just pocketed it. And at this time, she's also insisting that James needs to take out life insurance. You need to take out life insurance. You need to take out life insurance after everything that's happened. And basically, it was sending the kids to pawn the stuff in the house that did it for him. And he kicked her out. They remained married, but he kicked her out of the house and was like, I'm done with you.
She doesn't slow down, though. She's thrown out of the home, and she meets Frederick Cotton, who is a widower living on the outside of Newcastle upon Tyne. Now, he was a pitman. Again, a very hard and depressing job, I should imagine. Obviously, his wife had died, and he'd also lost 2 of his 4 sons. So very tragic. He was introduced to Mary Ann by a friend of theirs called Margaret. Now, Margaret had been helping Frederick out. She'd been acting as a sort of surrogate mother to the remaining 2 sons of Frederick's. Now, in March 1870, Margaret becomes ill. She's having stomach problems and she dies. Now, Mary then decides, this is the perfect time. Now Margaret's out the picture. I'm going to comfort Frederick. I'm going to be there for him. And soon she's pregnant with her 12th child. She spent most of her life pregnant, hasn't she? Jesus.
She marries him as well, which is committing bigamy, which obviously is not the biggest crime in all this, but it is worth a mention. And shortly after the marriage, she takes out 3 life insurance policies on him and the children, the 2 sons and Frederick.
And baby Robert Cotton was born in early 1871 as well.
Yep. Ugh. She immediately takes a life insurance policy out on the baby. Now, in 1872, she starts up with James Nattrass again, whose marriage has gone to shit. So they start knocking around again.
Now, do you know what's interesting? How she finds out that he's single. How does information travel in those days? It's not like she can pop on Facebook or, how does she find out? That's what I want to know.
I think they were probably still corresponding because much of her life was moving to the towns that James Nattrass lived in. Like, she would start up with a fella in his family and she would move them to be closer to James. So I don't think their affair ever stopped. I think that they probably had mutual friends and, that was a persisting affair.
Yeah. He's living 30 miles away from where she's living at the time. And she convinces her family that she has then to move to West Auckland so she can be near to him. So they move. She's so persuasive. They move, and then in December 1871, Frederick dies of gastric fever.
Yeah. A doctor does come out to see him, but he says, listen, when he arrives, he's beyond help. He's just going to die. And then very shortly after Frederick dying, his 10-year-old son dies, as does the baby Robert. So... Oh, my God. Yeah. So she gets with James Nattrass and she gets an insurance taken out on James's life. So they're like blissful, they finally get together after sort of having multiple affairs behind people's backs. But it doesn't last long because she's like, oh, fuck this guy. Insures him and then poisons him. He dies of this gastroenteritis. She gets 30 quid for him dying. And apparently she gives a statement to her. No, what it is she nurses him, and there's a witness to the nursing who says that he was writhing around in absolute agony to try and give himself some relief. He'd like crunch his sort of legs up to his chest, and she would pin him down and hold him straight. And so there's sort of speculation that is part of what she enjoyed as well, making people suffer in their sort of final hours.
The thing is as well, there is stomach ache. There is nought worse, is there? It is one of the most painful, unwelcome things, stomach ache. And it's irritating when you have it mildly. But imagine having it to this extent.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't think
awful.
you can even imagine it, because if you had it to anywhere near that degree now, you would just immediately be rushed into hospital and knocked out with something. But yeah, to have that without pain relief in, and a mouthful of stinking teeth is just too fucking much.
And
downwind of your own genitals. It's not fair, is it? Do you know what I mean?
It is not on at all. Oh, it was no kind of life. Now, she starts working as a nurse after this. Very caring woman. She started working as a nurse. And she meets a customs officer in the hospital who's recovering from smallpox. Now, there's some debate about his actual name, but we'll call him John Quick Manning.
There were rumours at this time, like, kids die a lot, don't they? And every guy, because what they're talking about is, yes, they're all different towns, but like Sunderland, Bishop Auckland, there's probably people from the northeast being like, I'm a sand dancer, I'm not a macam, but like it's all commutable area, the northeast. They're all places that Neil Jolly has great gigs. Like nearly all of these places, like Seaham, I've been there, Bishop Auckland, these are all places that I've gigged in for Neil Jolly.
Also, Neil Jolly, shout out to Neil Jolly, one of the nicest men in comedy.
Yeah, really good egg.
Really nice man.
Really good egg. Really nice gigs. Pays people properly, cares about comedians, and is one of the few promoters that isn't chronically mentally ill in your dealings with him.
Yep, just a lovely man, laid back.
Books loads of women.
Books loads of women. Sound.
Got the not a creep stamp from Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Obviously, if one day I found out anything different, I'll murder him in the street. But I think Neil is a good guy. Thumbs up. So, as these rumours going round, and there's one son left of Frederick Cotton, and that's Charles Edward. He's 8 years old. Now, she doesn't kill him for some reason, but she does trot him down to the workhouse and goes, there you go, have this kid. And they go, we can't accept children without their parents. They have to come in with them. And she's kicking off because she thinks the kid is what's stopping her from getting an ex-husband. So she's talking to Thomas Riley, who's a workhouse master there. And she was like, take the kid. And he's like, no, we can't. He can't come in here without like adult supervision, basically. It's like one of those pubs that thinks it's better than it is. Oh. And she says...
Listen, I'm sorry. I've got to get on something here. So the other day, right, I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to get this off my chest. So the other day, I went to go in a pub, and as you know, at the moment, because of coronavirus, you can only sit outside. So me and Tim went to this pub, and the human worm behind the counter said, he looked at my hand, and I had a packet of cigarettes in my hand, and he went, oh, just finding you a table. Oh, actually, if you're going to be smoking, the only seats we have are non-smoking outside at the moment, because they're next to the child's play area. Sorry, are those kids buying drinks in your establishment? No, they're not. When did pubs, right, start to become so geared up to the needs of children? It is an adult environment.
I think it depends. I think there are pubs around...
wacky warehouses, those hungry horse ones, fine, have them. I don't want to be in them, they're for families. But I am not. A pub is for adults. It's for adult human beings who want to drink, smoke, swear, bitch about people. You're turning away. Sorry, what is a kid going to buy in a pub? Fucking quid lemonade? Don't think so. I'm sorry. I was incensed. I was incensed. I mean, Tim was like, I said, you know what pisses me off? I said, if I went into a playground and was smoking and drinking, yeah, then people could have a problem. But they're in my environment.
I see your point, but I think that, I think if you looked at all the pubs across the UK, you're going to nice pubs in nice bits of London. I think that's in the minority. I think most pubs are smoke away next to the kids. I honestly don't think they give a shit.
Well, I think if it's an establishment that is serving alcohol, that does not have a separate play area inside, may I say, This outdoor play area had just been cobbled together because it didn't exist the last time I went in. I'm sorry, no. If you serve alcohol and there's a smoking area, that is an adult environment. Do not encroach on my free time. It's fucking kids. I'm sorry, but kids have been off school now for fucking ages, and they've been under everyone's feet, and just fucking let adults have a bit of space.
But isn't that it? Isn't it for like parents and mums in particular who've borne the brunt of it, so they can go and have a drink and be outside, and the kids are playing and they're actually getting some social time?
That's fine. Bring them by all means. Let them be outside, but it's an outside area, and if people want to smoke and drink out there, that is your problem. Either take them to a playground or don't fucking whinge. I hate children in pubs.
I have no views on it, but I'm not a pub goer. I'd much rather just get hammered in my own house.
I remember once I was in a pub, this was years ago. Oh no, this was it. This happened a couple of times, but I was in Edinburgh a few years ago and I was sitting in the Pleasance, and this was about 10:30 at night. And who was I with? I can't remember who I was with, but they swore. And this bloke went, excuse me, we've got children here. And I went, it's fucking 10:30 at night, mate. This is adult time.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Yeah, I think it's reasonable to be in a licensed venue at 10:30 at night and expect to hear spicy language.
Exactly. Anyway, I've digressed. What were you going to say?
I think I was talking about a dead child. Your favourite kind.
Yeah, don't find them in pubs, and good.
So, they say you can only bring this kid in here if it's
There's
got
a climbing frame.
And then she says, I could have married again but for the child. But there, he won't live long. He'll go the way of all the Cotton family, right? And Thomas Riley, the workhouse master, was like, oh, he might have been not a workhouse master. He was something to do with the government. He was like, that is weird because that kid's very healthy. Why would she say that? Then he bumps into her in the street 5 days later and she's like, oh, Charles is dead. And he remembers what she said, and he goes straight to the police, because the police, and he said, listen, this very healthy child turns up. She was like, oh, he'll go the way of this other family and die, and then he's dead 5 days later. So they report this to the police, and also Thomas Riley goes to the doctor and says, listen, just do an inquest into this child. Do some kind of basic autopsy, because I think that there's something amiss there. So because there's an inquest, she goes down. She doesn't even go to the doctor when Charles dies. She goes to the insurance and goes, he's dead, can I have the money? And they go, well, we need a death certificate. So she goes to the doctor and they're like, oh, we can't give you a death certificate because there's an inquest. And she's like, why is there an inquest? And they were like, oh, Thomas Riley thinks there should be an inquest into this child's death. So she goes and finds Thomas Riley and is like, what the fuck are you on about? Why is there an inquest? I can't get my money now. And she says, you know what? You can pay for the kid to be buried because you've caused all this fuss. Now, this happens at about the same time that the paper runs a story, because they hear that the other bodies of the children are being exhumed, and they basically print this in the paper and they talk about the local rumours. So it's all starting to unravel. Quick Manning hears about this and is like, fuck being associated with her, dumps her, and Mary is like ready to do a runner. The results come back from Charles's autopsy, don't they? And there's arsenic in his system.
Yeah, and also we should say at this point, she's pregnant again.
Yes.
Yeah, so after some good medical work.
Well, it was Dr. Thomas Scattergood who, because it was basically new technology, so they had kept samples from Charles's stomach and they tested it had arsenic in it. But this was absolutely revolutionary. They hadn't really tested like this post-mortem for arsenic. And so it was the Leeds School of Medicine that managed to do it, and obviously set a precedent that would then be a test that was used moving forward. So the Newcastle Chronicle is reporting on this. It later refers to her as a monster in human shape.
Well, at least it's not body shaming, or at least she's been described as having a human shape.
Yeah. Also, isn't it so funny that, like, when it comes to be like a woman is suspected of killing, I'm not obviously not defending her, but they're like, we've got to invent a new technology to catch this bitch. Like, before that, there would have been like people poisoning all the time and like men poisoning, and they're like, yeah, just one of those things in it. It's a stomach bug going round, and they're like, oh, a woman, is it? It's time to invent a new kind of technology. So John Quick Manning is like breaking up with her. By the way, he'd recovered from smallpox and survived, and he was working working as an excise officer, which is like a job I would love to. Is that going through like lost property and stuff, or is that like what's up your bum?
It's it could be both, really, I suppose. I think is that allowed in? Have you paid the right tax on that? What are you exporting? Right. Is that allowed? It's probably not as interesting as it sounds. What you want to do is rifle through lost luggage.
Yes, please. My absolute dream to be able to do that.
Do you know in Oklahoma, I mean, if it's still there, because I watched a documentary on this years ago, is the World Lost Luggage Centre, where all unclaimed luggage from aeroplanes goes. So you can buy all kinds of stuff. I think there's a bit where you can buy a case, just like, $20 for this case, and what you get, you get.
Yes, please. Except knowing my luck, someone I'll be with will be like, oh my God, it's full of designer clothes in my size. And I'd get something that's like, it's a dead snake and a load of filthy dildos. Yeah,
filthy dildos. That sounds like a band that would have supported the Towers of London.
I was going to say, all the horrors. Yeah, some band like that.
I wonder what happened to the Towers of London.
You've mentioned that. You absolutely hate them.
I hate them. They're probably working in a bank now or something, aren't they? Or,
No, I think they'll be doing, like, events. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think they'll be just doing something wacky. Or running a pub, like shares in a pub or something.
Ugh, no, thank you. What was he called, the guy from this? I've mentioned this before. What's his name?
Donny Tourette.
Donny Tourette. Yeah, that was it. Donny Tourette. Fucking hell. I'll tell you what, Donny Tourette, no fucking thank you.
So, as she was pregnant with a baby that is born, a little girl called Margaret, get another name, they delayed the trial. So, baby Margaret is born in prison, and after that, the trial commences. Now, during this time, she writes to the newspapers. She's like, I'm completely innocent. I'm having a baby in prison. I'm a pregnant woman being put on trial for something I didn't get. And basically, people became quite sympathetic to her cause because she just wouldn't let people forget that she was there. She wrote to James Robertson, her ex-husband, and was like, please bring my child and my stepchildren to see me, and whatever you do, don't let me die in here. So she was trying everything.
Well, it didn't work. I mean, her defence was... Her defence argued that Charles had died from inhaling arsenic that was in the wallpaper. I mean, arsenic was green
wallpaper.
Was a common feature in many products and things during this time. But there was evidence as well that she had been to shops buying arsenic because you had to fill in the poison register, didn't you?
Yeah.
So she's buying shitloads of it. Mm-hmm. So she said, Charles died because he was inhaling arsenic from the wallpaper, despite the fact that, she was absolutely fine. And it took the jury 90 minutes to find her guilty.
My God.
Yeah, no messing about there.
So she was sentenced to death by hanging, and it was a guy called William Colcroft who was the hangman, and he botched it. He did the sums wrong, and she went through the trapdoor, but the rope was too short, so apparently this is horrific, she was just sort of jerking on the end of the rope, and he had to lean down and push her down to try and break her neck. Grim. So, yeah, because of her botched execution, the fact she'd been writing to the newspapers, she's been slightly almost revisionist of like, she was basically she was a woman wronged by the justice system, and that there was quite a lot of sympathy around her. And some people think that they just know the name and think she's sort of like a kindly older woman from the northeast, and they don't know that she was actually a very horrible serial killer. Her body was buried. You'd hate this, Rachel. Her body was buried in the grounds of Durham Prison, which is obviously a very infamous prison, female prison as well.
Disgusting. As you say, she maintained her innocence until her death. She was only convicted of the one murder, but they estimate there were approximately 21 victims, which include 3 of her husbands, 11 of the children, her mum, her friend, her lover, and 4 stepchildren. Busy woman.
Wow. Yeah, busy woman. That is Mary Ann Cotton. Thanks for being patient. We've been trying to meet to do this podcast, and it's just been... just various things, because the world started moving again. Our schedules have been a bit hectic, so thanks so much for your patience. And we got up at 7:30 to write this up, and now we're recording it. We've had a meeting together on some very exciting news, hopefully around some more killer stuff, about some live shows that we'll keep you posted on. Please do get tickets to the live stream if you haven't already, and then it means that I can return to my true spiritual home of the charity shops of North Wales.
I'm really looking forward to the live show as well, because it'll be the first time we've been on stage together in over a year. I mean, we did the live show at Monkey Barrel, but with an audience, with a stage with lights. I'm going to be nervous, I tell you.
Yeah, I think I'm going to be shitting my considerably bigger pants compared to this time last year. It's quite worrying, isn't it? But it's going to be fine. I'm really looking forward to it, and I think we picked an absolute belter to do for the show.
Yeah,
it's just
I'm really
sort of
excited.
I hope you still like us. I'm just quite scared about it.
Please still like us. But we're looking forward to it, and more info coming soon on exciting stuff, we hope.
I think is that everything?
Yeah, just a thank you to everyone who donates to the Patreon. That helps so much. Thank you.
Hugely.
Thank you to everyone who listens. And if you're not into us and you hate listening, I mean, it's a weird thing to do, but I can't criticise you because I do that with stuff. So I hope you've had a good hate listen. Or a tough wank. I mean, whatever.
I think if you're hate listening to two women with a shared interest and enthusiasm and a friendship, I think you need to take a look at yourself rather than us.
Yeah, I agree.
We'll see you soon. Thank you for listening.
Bye. If you're happy and you know it, clap your hands.
Great.
Define happy. That's what I say.